It is Baltimore's Talk Radio 680 WCBM. I am Kevin Battle, and as promised, I am going to let you know that you have expanded options outside what the mainstream media is reporting for presidential candidates. A lot of people have already thrown their hats in the rings, and a lot of people are getting a lot of attention. That would be Donald Trump, Ron Desantis, Nikki Haley, Vivek. But there are other candidates that you should know about. They have something to say. Steve Laffey is one of those candidates. He's done a lot in his life. He has a small farm. He's made movies. He's a former mayor of the second largest city in a small state. Fixing America is his campaign slogan. It is the title of his documentary as well. He says America is basically bankrupt. Since that time when that documentary was made, 2011, America's national debt has doubled, and we are dealing with a banking crisis. So he could be the perfect man for the time. Good afternoon, Steve. Thank you very much for joining us.
Kevin, great to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
Now, you have a pretty interesting background. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm a relatively poor kid from Cranston, from a troubled family. He went to Bowdoin College. He was a direct admit at Harvard Business School, went into the financial field, and about 15 years later was the president, chief operating officer for a $500 million revenue investment banking firm, which we successfully sold under my direction for $785 million in 2001. But I wasn't really in charge of the money. Alan Morgan being the great CEO, and I was the president COO at the end. But then the city of Cranston went bankrupt. I felt a calling to go back. I loved it, took over and made the most rapid transformation of any city or state in the United States of America in Cranston, Rhode Island, with an 8-notch upgrade in the bond rating over 3.5 years. Never had been done. I ran for the U.S. Senate. I lost. I wrote a book called Primary Mistake through Penguin Books, pointing out the decrepit stance of many in my Republican Party and the leadership. I then moved to Colorado. I made a movie called Fixing America, which was a well-regarded documentary. You can still get on Amazon. And yes, I have 6 children. The 3 youngest ones are all at Colorado State University. I homeschool personally the last 3. We've educated children, Montessori school, public school, private school, Catholic school. I know a lot about education, and I know a lot about healthcare through my daughter's 8-year struggle with stage 4 cancer. So a beautiful wife, and my kids love me, and I love them, and 3 of them on the campaign trail with me right now.
Oh, very good. I'm glad the family's able to be together for the most part as you're traveling around the country. And you were elected the mayor of Cranston, Rhode Island. Second largest in Rhode Island, about 83,000 residents, was in much similar shape as the nation is now, facing massive debt, insolvency, the recent banking crisis, and the FDIC bailout of all the deposits. How would you solve the national debt crisis that we face, $31.5 trillion?
Yes, there's a number of steps for just the national debt. Forget about the FDIC for a second. One would simply be that we have to fix Social Security. At stevelaffey.com, I've got a complete plan. It can't be that as fellow Republican leaders say we won't touch it. You know, that's fiscally immoral. We're going to have to fix it, and that means a system where young people are in a new system invested in a worldwide basket of investments. They get far more when they retire. The people who are retired get what they got. The people, 43 to 57, they're going to have to enter the new system. They may not have enough time to get more, but this program will take the $61 trillion, twice the national debt almost, down to zero over time. That will do a lot. 2, why don't we just adopt best practices of something like Switzerland? The Swiss debt break means they balance the budget over a business cycle. They have no choice. They can't grow spending over how fast the economy grows. They started it when their debt to GDP was 24%. Guess what it is today? 24%. Ours on a public borrowing of debt is 100%, which puts us in lines with countries like Greece and other really dastardly run countries fiscally. So we are bankrupt. The reason I decided to run for president now, in my announcement statement, was the financial crisis like you've never seen is actually here, and it must be solved, or everybody's lives will change dramatically for the worse if we don't solve it and get on it now.
Yeah, and every single American right now, according to the national debt clock in New York City, is about $100,000 in the hole. You owe $100,000 just for waking up in the United States, whether you're man, woman, child, immigrant, doesn't matter. How do you rein in the spending, the out-of-control spending, almost $7 trillion a year?
Well, number one, you put in a program where people can't spend anymore, like the Swiss debt break. But you also, and this is where Republicans have totally failed. My party, I'm a Republican. When Donald Trump was president, he ran up $8 trillion of debt in 4 years. We as Republicans went after Barack Obama day after day after day for $8 trillion in 8 years. So this has been a disaster. The number one thing is to take a problem one at a time. For example, in America, we spend 18% of gross domestic product on healthcare. The average industrialized country that has better healthcare, they're at 12%. Well, that 6% differential is well north of $1 trillion. So there's a lot of money out there, Kevin, a lot of money to get. The other way to do it is that we cannot have the same tax system. Rich people of both parties love to talk about something different. They don't like tax cuts. They like tax rise. They have all these things they say, but the average American goes, we're not going to get more money out of a stone. I would estimate myself that there's at least $600 billion to get if we change to like a Herman Cain 999 plan, half a fair tax, half a flat tax. It's on my website, stevelaffey.com. I became friends with Herman Cain. Go watch the videos of people like Rick Santorum and Mitt Romney attacking a guy who has a master's in math from Memphis State, right?
Yeah.
Herman Cain, and watch them attack him. But he was right.
And
we need a new tax system, and that's why it's one of my plans.
Herman Cain was right.
The money.
And it makes sense to a lot of average Americans like me. It made sense. He rang a bell with me. Speaking of ringing a bell, classes start in the United States every morning. Education is suffering. You've seen it from all different sides. You've homeschooled kids. You've been in public school, private school. Progressive systems have really seemed to dumb down education to a lowest common denominator, or focus on creating activists instead of rising to future economies or challenges that we now face in this country. How would you improve education? Remember, we're in Baltimore, where 23 schools have 0 students proficient in math at grade level.
Yes, the only way, and you hit on it, the most important thing, because I have 6 children, I know a lot about it. I taught the top finance course at the University of Rhode Island, so I know education. We have to admit that the public school system cannot be fixed, and that every parent in the city of Baltimore needs a check to go to somewhere else. It doesn't, by the way, matter. It couldn't get any worse whether they went online and learned, like my kids sometimes have done. It wouldn't make, if they were at Catholic schools, they just need a check for $7,000, let's say, versus I'm imagining in Baltimore the $23,000 you spend per student, right? Then we can drive down property taxes. Kids will get a better education. But the pretense, again, among my Republican counterparts, that if we only stop the wokeness, which is important, right? We got kids who can't make change but are activists for some crazy cause, right, at the age of 18, but they can't make change. So we need to change the whole system. But the first step is saying it cannot be fixed. The public sector unions have destroyed the school system. We need to get every single kid we can out. And if a small remnant are left because they can't go anywhere else, you could put $50,000 in each one of those kids, and you would save an enormous amount of money. I'll give you one example. If the federal government, which I don't think should be involved in education at all, if they really cared, wouldn't they have the best Algebra 1 teacher? Remember, it's 2023. There's something called the internet. Wouldn't they have the best Algebra 1 teacher teaching algebra with 15-second segments so that if you had a problem in school, you could go there and get it? Math is easy to learn if you have it in segments like that. They don't, do they, Kevin?
No, they do not. They do not. And your philosophy on education is, again, very simple. The voucher system or the credit system is very easy for everyone to understand, just like the tax code system that you and Herman Cain had talked about. President Biden said that China was not going to eat our lunch in the campaign trail in 2020. He and many others say Russia was our number one problem. I've said for years that China is America's largest threat. They are creating a multipolar world. They're moving part of the world away from the U.S. dollar. They're brokering peace deals in the Middle East as we speak. As we run up debt, run low on war munitions, drain our petroleum reserves, is China just waiting for us to weaken? And how would you handle that relationship?
I've said this since 2005, when Pat Toomey from the Club for Growth, future U.S. Senator, now retired senator, endorsed me. I wrote on the Club for Growth, no trading with China, 2005. I proceeded to have a campaign for a year about how we had to stop trading and bring everything back home, or at least nearshore. And no one wanted to do that because both Republicans and Democrats, elites, were in the hands of communist China through massive lobbying and large corporations making enormous short-term profits at the expense of workers in America. So I've been right. You've been right. And I made a movie called Fixing America. A third of the movie is about stopping trading with China. So the people kind of coming around today, like Marco Rubio saying, oh, there's a warning shot across our bow from China. They are 20 years too late, but we still got to get going. But the bigger thing, too, is that we have to approach it more holistically. It's not China doing this. It's China, Russia, Venezuela, Iran, Syria, all against us. We should mention this all the time, because when Russia's doing something, they're getting help from China. When North Korea sends a missile up to test our will, there's an Iranian standing there. So good versus evil is what's happening. They are ganging up, but we can still win. But we've got to bring everything out of China now. It may take 5 to 10 years. And if they still want to make some T-shirts, they can. But when I talk about getting stuff out of there, I mean high tech, Apple computer. The tariffs had to be higher. President Trump went a little bit on some goods. He did a trade agreement that failed. China didn't do the trade agreement. The point is to have freedom. We've got to degrade communist China, and it's working. Even these little things are starting to work because their population's declining. They became a dictator. They can't seemingly run things anymore. They've lied about the numbers. Let's just make it happen faster, Kevin.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And that's what has to happen.
Steve Laffey is our guest. He's a Republican candidate for President of the United States. SteveLaffey.com is his website. Steve, 4 Americans recently kidnapped. 2 were killed. Fentanyl flowing freely, killing 100,000 Americans a year. Drugs have decimated our cities. How would you fix the U.S. southern border?
Yeah, it's a vital national interest that Mexico becomes a real democracy. You know, if I hear one more article every day about the Palestinians and yet nothing about Mexico, Nicaragua, and all the countries to the south, right? I've been to Guatemala. I've been across the border and seen what was going to happen to young ladies who were going to be raped and assaulted that night. It is immoral. President Trump started to build a wall, but it has to be a much more holistic thing by going to the Mexican government. I've watched Mexican police encourage people to leave the country at the border in Altamira, Mexico, south of Tucson. That all needs to stop. And it must be a much more holistic presence of America. We're not going to go into the country, but the Mexican leaders need to know that now we are serious. We are not going to allow any of this anymore. And if that means other stuff isn't coming across by truck, then so be it. If we have to crush them economically till they get it, Mexico would get it. It's in their national interest also. We have just never really focused on the problem, Kevin.
Yeah.
Never.
Could
ever.
you imagine if we froze all of their exports to the United States, all those trucks that they make in Mexico? If they said, we're not taking them here in the United States until you fix your problem. That would be amazing.
Say, for example, every month you raise tariffs on certain goods by 1% and kept saying every month to the leader of Mexico, are you getting the message now? You know, after 3 or 4 months, they will take care of it. But we've never tried that, Kevin.
No, we haven't. It's been a failure since we bailed out their peso during the first Bush administration.
That's right. That's exactly right. You know that.
I said to my dad, I was working as a laborer for a construction company at that time, and I turned to my dad when that news report came across the radio, and I said, we just bought Mexico as a state. Hey, Maryland has strict gun laws. Gun-free zones are practically everywhere here. Crime is rampant. Baltimore City is very dangerous. The average person arrested for homicide has been already arrested 8 times for other major crimes. How do you ensure Marylanders can protect themselves?
There's been some good Supreme Court rulings. I would just pray and hope that the people of Maryland understand this one thing. If everybody learned how to handle a gun like I did in middle age, by the way, I didn't grow up with guns in Rhode Island. I didn't have any. I was too busy in business to care about it in a sense. Around 2009, I started taking gun courses, real serious ones. I took 3 of them before I bought a gun. And now I'm not an expert, but I specialize in home defense for my family. And I own the right guns with the right ammunition. And I go and train out at ranges. If everybody would start doing this, it would go away. The scared. I think people are scared of guns, but I feel safer in Wyoming and in northern Colorado, wherever I'm at a restaurant, when I realize that a certain percentage, maybe 20 to 40% of people around me are carrying concealed weapons, like myself. If people of Baltimore could understand this, I don't know how we make the turn. Yeah. If they understood this, crime would go down rapidly in these cities. If we get all the 18-year-olds to do 6 months of service, including using and handling a gun, you would say 10 years from now, this wasn't an issue because guns by themselves don't hurt anybody.
I know that you're spending a lot of time in New Hampshire trying to get your name out there. Steve Laffey, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. I hope you get a lot of traction for your campaign and some of your ideas move forward, and hopefully we can get you up in the polls.
We got to change the shooting match. Thank you. SteveLaffey.com, and I appreciate being on with you, Kevin.
My pleasure, sir. Thank you very much. Good luck to you on the campaign trail.
Bye-bye.
We'll introduce you to presidential candidate number 2 next, right here on WCBM. He is a musician who served in the Navy, former Montana Secretary of State, also a state senator, familiar with Maryland, having earned a degree in engineering at the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis. His campaign slogan is Pay It Forward. You can follow him on Twitter at Stapleton_MT. We welcome to WCBM here in Baltimore, Secretary Corey Stapleton. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
Before we get into the nuts and bolts of your plans and your politics, please explain to the folks of Maryland who you are. I know you've spent time in Annapolis.
Yep. I spent 4 years on the Bay, as we would say, it was a great place to be from, not a great place to be, as we used to say when we were at the academy. Not an easy education for sure. Really loved my time. I lived up and down the East Coast, actually, with my Navy tours. I deployed overseas aboard the aircraft carrier, the John F. Kennedy, and the Aegis cruiser, the USS Way City, and all of those were on East Coast ports. So I spent a dozen years or so up and down the eastern seaboard. But I'm a Montanan, fourth-generation Montana kid. I grew up here and loved to fly fish and do all the things that you think that we do when you watch the series Yellowstone. I love it out here, and I've got 4 grown kids now, and as you pointed out, I spent a dozen years in our state capital, 8 years as a state senator. I was the Republican leader in the Montana State Senate, and I was term limited out there. And then most recently, 4 years as elected as the Montana Secretary of State. So
your campaign now, your slogan is Pay It Forward. You were a financial advisor. You know about financing today on the backs of our great-grandchildren. We're just financing everything and putting it on their tab. How do you cut the U.S. debt?
How many hours do we have for the show? It's so difficult. And, in just a minute or two, I think most people understand Pay It Forward. If you've gone through Starbucks and someone ahead of you bought a drink for you and you get up to the cashier and they said, hey, your stuff's already paid for, you remember how you feel about that. I feel that way about the generations before us. Our parents, our grandparents, those who fought the world wars, they sacrificed a lot. They didn't live very long. They didn't have the standard of living, but they all sacrificed to give us these great times that we live in now. And it is beyond imaginable for me that we are squandering this. We aren't just spending the money we're raising in taxes. We're putting it on credit cards, trillions of dollars, not just Democrats, not just Republicans. We're talking everyone. And that is a tragedy because we didn't get to be the greatest country in the world by spending ourselves into oblivion. It's just remarkable to me. I've got a lot to talk about because I think it's taking the emphasis away from spending on people who have been on the planet for 80 years and reinvesting in kids in their first 20 years of life. Let's refocus what our priorities are, world-class education system, getting people ready in this disrupted new world, the internet era, the social media era, whatever it is, but reorient what it means to be a servant leader. And I want to do that as president because I don't think Congress can do it by itself.
Yeah, and you mentioned education. It is suffering. There's progressive systems, I believe, have dumbed down education to a lowest common denominator type issue instead of focusing on future economies and challenges and technology. We're focusing on activism. How would you improve education? And remember that we are in Baltimore, which has 23 schools in which 0 students were proficient at math at grade level.
Well, that's a broken system, and it's just incredible because I come from a state where we have incredible public school systems. So I know it's not the same everywhere, and I know that charter schools are the answer somewhere, and in other places they're not. And I'm a subscriber to, hey, charter schools, we need good public schools, we need private schools, we need home schools. That really isn't the issue. I think that we need to invest in the systems. I think we need to de-arm all these social, cultural wars that are going on. It's a distraction. That's not what education is about, and so there's several things. Funding is part of it. But again, it's a matter of what is a nation's priorities. And I think it's far more noble to invest in a child and far less expensive than to fix an adult. And what we're seeing now in the times that we live in is a bunch of broken adults. We see people without the ability to critically think. That's being exploited by disinformation. People, 20 years ago, you could turn on the news and there were 3 channels with news, or you'd read it in a newspaper, or they'd listen to a radio, and then you'd go about your day. And we would all pretty much agree on what was being talked about. That's all gone. Now everybody's a genius, tongue in cheek. Everybody that's got a megaphone and social media can get their friends and people who want to just belong to something into believing anything. And so the future depends on our ability to educate our kids critically, thinking about what's important. Yes, math, science, arithmetic, reading, all of that, but also how do they navigate and how do they continue on this heritage of America being the greatest? And that has a whole lot of platforms. And I hope to talk about that as I run for president, because I don't hear anybody else talking about it.
Yeah, that's very
interesting.
interesting.
A lot of lies and deceit.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I love that slogan, invest in a child instead of fixing an adult. On your website, CoreyStapleton.com, you talk about politics as usual. You have to get away from that. You seem to be a more positive person than some candidates. You don't want to bicker about the flavor of the day problem, but you want to get to the issues.
Yeah, that's right. There is a lot of reading and a lot to be learned about some of the great CEOs of the world, the great head coaches, the great leaders, the political leaders. They didn't spend their time bickering and fear-based mongering. That works okay, I think, sometimes in the legislative branch. And I will say this as a public servant, I've served in both the executive branch of government and the legislative branch of government. And legislatively, you run a little bit as a team, and sometimes it's easier to motivate people with fear-based something, the sky is falling, Mexico's going to invade us, China's going to beat us up, blah, blah, blah. The reality is the whole world looks to the USA as the gold standard. We need to remember that. We need to conduct ourselves. That's such an honor. Why we would ever squander that? I even see some of my major opponents now in this race on the Republican side doing what we did in the 1930s as the Conservative Party, and that is becoming isolationist and freeloading on the rest of the world and just kind of saying, hey, let's just mind our own business. And the reality is we lose our influence in the world, and China gains it. And you see that they just brokered a deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Mm-hmm. That used to be our job. It matters because they begin to set the terms for the future.
That's very interesting because, as you mentioned, that used to be our job. It seems like the U.S. is pulling away from influence in the Middle East. China is creating a multipolar world. They're moving away from the U.S. dollar in some ways. As we run up debt, run low on munitions, and drain our petroleum reserves. So we're sort of flat-footed if there's a big issue going down with China and Taiwan. Is China just waiting for us to weaken? And how would you handle that relationship?
So China's been around a lot longer than the U.S. We've been here 250 years. They've been there thousands, right? Mm-hmm. They're not any more sophisticated than us when it comes to being able to organize and make results happen. There are a lot of trial and error, just like us. They have their own issues for sure. But the one thing that they know is the long game, and they are playing the long game. It's inevitable that their economy will catch up to and likely pass ours simply because they have 5 or 6 times the population. They will likely be our rival regardless. They are our rival. That doesn't in itself make them our enemy. In many cases, they may be our opponent, but it is not inevitable to have war on the horizon with the second largest economy in the world. The U.S. and China can compete, but we don't have to be, antagonists. And you hear a lot of the rhetoric of the people running for president, and they act like we're going to war because that's what people want to hear, right? We want to fight. And I don't think that's the right thing that a president ought to convey. I think a steady hand, I think a historical approach, I think an idea that we should be partners, competitors in many cases, maybe sometimes opponents with China for the next 100, 200 years. But it doesn't have to be bloodshed, and it certainly doesn't have to be conflict in the sense that Ukraine and Russia are basically fighting for life.
And that seems to be a proxy war with the United States. We're providing a lot of weapons and ammunition and money to Ukraine. That a lot of people are being killed there. I've read around 300,000 soldiers have been killed. Would you send more money and more weapons, or how do you see this ending in Ukraine?
So I just returned from Ukraine 3 or 4 weeks ago. I went to Kyiv and spent some time, went to the places that the Russians had occupied, and I've seen the rape and the genocide effects of that on it. And it's a sad situation. But if you want to think of it in historical context, the Berlin Wall has essentially moved eastward. Mm-hmm. And Ukraine, for better or worse, has become the new front for Europe. And unfortunately, this happens in Europe every 100 years or so. There's another band of people who want to overtake their neighbors. The French did it with Napoleon, and Germany did it with Hitler. And, history tends to repeat itself. We have an interest in solving this economically, and yes, by proxy. U.S. has been fighting proxy wars for what now? 70 years? Mm-hmm. Since World War II, Korea, Vietnam. It beats the alternative. We don't need to have boots on the ground, but it is our strategic interest to make sure that a nuclear dangerous Russia doesn't begin to grip, because they're not going to stop. They didn't stop with Crimea in 2014.
Okay, so you're of the ilk, fight them over there, keep them over there, and keep them isolated.
I would prefer not to do it with weapons. Sanctions go a long way, and their economy now is, 1/10 the size of China. The reality is that we're starting to form a soft axis over there with North Korea, China, and Russia all talking together.
Yeah.
Geographically, it kind of makes sense. And so if the edge of that empire is in the Ukraine area, so be it. But for us to become isolationists or freeload and not see that American influence losing in the world is not a good thing, it's part of a bigger equation. Do we want to become like England is now, where they're maybe the 10th or 12th nation in the world after having been number one? Well, part of that is international relations, and part of that is power projection, and part of that is protecting American interests abroad. That includes sea lanes around China, includes air superiority. It really has a lot to do in the future with the space and who controls space.
We are speaking with former Secretary of State of Montana, Corey Stapleton, 2024 presidential candidate. One final question, sir. Maryland has strict gun laws. You're from Montana. Gun-free zones are practically everywhere here. Crime's rampant, though. Baltimore is a dangerous city. The average person who's arrested for homicide had 8 previous arrests for other crimes. How would you ensure that Marylanders and all Americans can protect themselves?
Well, you pointed out the first part, which is when you come from Montana, you don't even worry about it. People can carry, people can have concealed carry, and we really don't have issues. Of course, we have grizzly bears, and we have reasonable reasons to need guns, and we're spaced out, and people tend to leave people alone. So I know inner city matters, and that's a tough issue, but taking away people's rights to have guns is not an option. Like I just said, I just got back from Ukraine. This is a modern nation. People need guns. You never know when your own government turns against you or your neighbor turns against you. And so the ability for citizens to protect themselves in perpetuity, meaning forever, not just this year or 10 years or 100 years or 200 years, but Americans always are going to need to be able to protect themselves, and they need to have weapons which are commensurate with the threat. Not overboard, but, if a neighborhood can band together and protect itself against an invading force or a hostile neighbor or a civil war or whatever, those are things, and that's why that Second Amendment is there, because it's a difficult subject, especially when you have sensitive school shootings, and we need to fix a whole lot of things. When I talk about paying it forward, I'm not just talking about economically. I'm talking about paying it forward so that every kid, when they're 2 years old and 4 years old and 6 years old and 8 years old, feels loved and needed and is nurtured. And we're not creating kids that ever even contemplate the violence and the suicide rates and the drug use that we're seeing. We need to get back to where we invest in our kids, and that's as a community, families, all of that stuff. We're seeing the breakdown of the family that started, 40 years ago, and we are on the wrong course. I'd like to get us on the right course, I've got a lot of energy. I got a lot of hope. I'm heading to New Hampshire this week, Iowa, some of the early states. Hope that people will look me up at CoreyStapleton.com, get in contact with the campaign, and I hope to make a great difference.
Corey Stapleton, I'm honored that you spent some time with us here in Baltimore. Welcome home, I guess, your second home. You spent a lot of time in Annapolis
That's
area.
Right.
Good
Go
luck.
Navy.
Good luck on the campaign trail, sir.
Thank you, Kevin.
1600 Pennsylvania Avenue is the goal. Special thanks to our great producer, Noah Dankner. Amber Athey is up next. I'm Kevin Battle. I hope you enjoyed today's peek behind the presidential curtain as much as I did. I had a chance to ask some folks who want to earn your vote and represent you in the nation's highest office as the most powerful person on the planet, and I figured, you know what? You should hear from them as well. Not every candidate is a big marquee name, as you know, or not every candidate has had all the elite class or the Wall Streeters or the government officials behind them. Yes, some are media darlings and others are largely ignored by reporters and must buy a lot of airtime to get their message out, while others get all that for free. Remember Ross Perot and his TV specials years ago? I love those. We are at the beginnings of the race for 2024. Names will come, names will go, rumors will heat up. A candidate that has support today may not last, and vice versa. It all changes. Just ask Joe Biden. How many times did he run for president and had to drop out? Yes, it all changes once the speeches start and the primaries are underway and the money begins flowing. Sometimes a dark horse mounts a major challenge. Sometimes a candidate from a small town becomes a big household name. Anyone born in America can dream or dare to become president of the United States. You met two of them today, two Republican men who each love this country, but may just have slightly different ideas about it. But they also have enough guts to put their names on the ballot. Will Republicans embrace or ignore these two? Will their message mold the platform for other candidates? Will they snag a cabinet position in somebody else's administration? I'm Kevin Battle. I want to thank Steve Laffey of Colorado by way of Rhode Island, Laffey, SteveLaffey.com, or on Twitter at Steve Laffey, and Montana's Corey Stapleton, CoreyStapleton.com, on Twitter at Stapleton_MT. We'll talk to more candidates as the months roll on, trust me on that. And if you'd like to hear their interviews again or share this interview with friends, just go to my YouTube channel, Kevin Battle, and search Presidential Candidates. Thank you very much for listening, Baltimore. I love you. I truly appreciate you. I hope you have a great week. God bless you, Charm City.